Thank you, Minister. That concludes general questions for this afternoon, and we move on to the next item of business, which is First Minister's questions, and I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, President Officer. I begin by noting the horrific attack on the Jewish community in Manchester, and I send our very best wishes to all of those who have been affected. Disposable income is what people have left to spend after paying their taxes and their bills. Put simply, it's about how many pounds they have left in their pockets. Now, we've analysed ONS data, and it reveals that the average Scottish household now has less disposable income in real terms than they did in 2007. People in Scotland are worse off than when John Swinney and the SNP came to power. He must surely be ashamed of that fact.
First Minister.
So before I answer Mr Finlay's question, can I express my horror at the attack on a synagogue in Manchester this morning? This attack came on Yom Kippur, the holiest time in the Jewish calendar, and my thoughts are with the victims, their families and all of the Jewish communities in Scotland and across the United Kingdom. I record our thanks and appreciation to the emergency services and the first responders for the speed of their response. Anti-Semitism is an evil we must confront and stand resolutely against, and I know that the whole Chamber speaks with one voice on this important question. I acknowledge the pressures that families face in household income. That's why, for example, at the start of September, the Scottish Government took another step to try to assist families by abolishing peak rail fares for good, which means that, for example, a commuter from Glasgow to Edinburgh will save of the order of in excess of £12 a day in relation to their travel. Just one of the examples of how the Scottish Government is trying to support the household incomes of individuals. Of course, one of the reasons why our economy has struggled since 2000 in recent years is because of the effect of Brexit. Brexit has made every single one of us poorer, and the responsibility for that is the Conservative Government that delivered the Brexit that they did.
Russell Finlay.
SNP tax rises mean that most Scots now pay more than people doing the same job in the rest of the UK. And Scottish workers fear being hit yet again by Labour. Rachel Reeves has been asked to rule out tax rises.
And she won't.
She was asked at least 10 times, but she refuses to do so. People in Scotland, we know, already have fewer pounds in their pockets. They can't afford ever-increasing taxation. Labour won't be upfront about tax rises, so will the SNP.
Let's hear Mr Finlay.
Will John Swinney rule out any tax rises for workers in Scotland in his next budget?
Yes.
First Minister.
As part of my public duty, I must correct what Mr Finlay has said. And Mr Finlay was wrong, because over half of taxpayers in Scotland continue to pay less tax than if they lived elsewhere in the United Kingdom. Now, I know that it is important that we all speak accurately to Parliament. It's a duty.
Let's hear the First Minister.
It's a duty I faithfully deploy.
Colleagues, let's hear one another.
It's a duty I faithfully deploy, and I'll also point it out where Mr Finlay misleads Parliament with incorrect information as well. So,
Thank you.
Mr Finlay knows full well.
We are not having pointing and shouting from our seats. First Minister, continue.
Mr Finlay knows full well that the Government will set out its tax plans in the budget in an orderly and rational fashion, and as a consequence of that, Parliament will be able to scrutinise the Government's financial provisions. But I reiterate the point I have just made. Over half of taxpayers in Scotland continue to pay less than if they lived elsewhere in the United Kingdom, and I'm very proud of that fact.
Russell Finlay.
This First Minister leads a government that doesn't know the difference between fact and fiction. Workers in Scotland know exactly how much tax they are being forced to pay by the SNP. Now, the next Scottish budget must bring down costs for families and businesses, but it must also give greater opportunities for young people. The SNP have inflicted economic damage in Scotland by slashing college budgets. Audit Scotland have today revealed that the SNP have cut college funding by 20%, and that's in real terms since the last Holyrood election. SNP cuts mean fewer people going to college, learning new skills and advancing their careers. Reducing funding to college directly harms economic growth, which is something the SNP don't seem to understand. So will John Swinney commit to reversing this cut for the good of young Scots and for the good of Scotland's economy?
First Minister.
Well, the first thing I would say is that as a consequence of the government's investment and the approach that we take in the education system, 93% of school leavers leave school and go into a positive destination such as work, training.
Let's hear the First Minister.
Such as work, training or further study, including attendance at our colleges. Now, in the last Funding Council allocations, they provided a 2.6% increase in teaching funding for 25-26 and an increase of almost 5% in capital maintenance funding to help colleges further invest in the learning experience of students. So this government is absolutely committed to ensuring that we invest in our college sector to support students to move on to positive destinations. And of course, the challenges that we face in the management of the public finances have not in any way been helped by the austerity of the Conservatives and the folly of the Liz Truss budget which Russell Finlay supported.
Russell Finlay.
He always comes unstuck when he comes face to face with the facts produced by Audit Scotland. Cutting college funding limits opportunities for young people and it harms our economy. The SNP's chaotic and irresponsible approach means there's less money for schools, hospitals, roads and everything else that needs to be fixed. Public services keep declining, yet taxes, household bills and everyday costs continue to rise. It's a fact, whether John Swinney likes it or not, that people in Scotland are worse off after 18 years of the SNP. Now, in the upcoming Labour and SNP budgets, workers could face a double whammy of taxes. Is this all John Swinney has to offer Scotland? Higher bills and worse public services?
First Minister.
Well, I would point out to Mr Finlay that the Scottish Government operates and delivers a balanced budget in every single year, and we have done so since 2007. In relation to household bills, I've already cited the impact of the step on peak rail fares. But of course, council tax in Scotland is lower than if people lived in comparable properties in England. Water bills are lower in Scotland than if people lived in England. We have free prescription charges here in Scotland that help household incomes. We have free eye examinations in Scotland, a great preventative measure, but it helps with the cost of living. We also have students that go to university without paying any tuition fees, unlike the situation in England. So we have in Scotland responsible use of the public finances compared to the chaos and the austerity of the Conservatives, and I'm proud to defend the record of this government.
Thank you. Obviously, many members wish to put questions today. We'll be better able to get more members in if we conduct ourselves appropriately. I call Anna Sarwar at question number 2.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm horrified by the news coming out of Manchester today, and like others, my thoughts are with all those affected and the wider Jewish community. Yom Kippur should be a time of peace and reflection, but instead they have been the victim of hate and violence. We must all stand against anti-Semitism and all forms of prejudice and hate. Presiding Officer, this morning a scathing Audit Scotland report laid bare the SNP's failure to support our colleges and young people. A 20% real terms cut to colleges over the last 5 years, 30,000 fewer Scots getting places, and a cash crisis putting jobs, institutions and places at risk. So can I ask John Swinney, when Scotland needs a new generation of skilled workers, why are apprenticeships and colleges of less value to the SNP than university?
First Minister.
Well, that's not the case, because last year over 25,000 people started a modern apprenticeship in Scotland, and there's a record 39,000 individuals now in training, including 20,000 aged 16 to 19, which is an increase of 2.8% on the previous year. So as a consequence of the government's investment, which, let me reiterate, because there was a lot of noise when I made this statement a little while ago, the Scottish Funding Council allocations provide a 2.6% increase in teaching funding for 25-26 and an increase of almost 5% in capital maintenance funding to help colleges invest in their estate. So, combined with the investment that the Scottish Government is making in apprenticeships and also making in the college sector, we are investing in the skills of the future, and that's exactly what the Government should do.
Anna Sarwar.
Devastating. Devastating. That's how one student reacted to the news that the Alloa campus faces closure at Forth Valley College, and it seems that the First Minister would rather put his head in the sand and ignore Audit Scotland rather than confront the issues. Anne-Marie Harley, a lecturer at the college, said that the social benefits of what colleges do are not recognised by this SNP government. Working class kids being let down by the SNP and by John Swinney, and not for the first time. The future of Forth Valley College, home to thousands of students, is now at risk due to the financial crisis caused by the SNP. So will John Swinney intervene to save the Alloa campus?
First Minister.
Well, this is a subject that has been uppermost in my mind after the representations from my friend Keith Brown, the member for Ochil and Dunblane. So these issues are very much to the fore in my mind. The Education Secretary is actively involved on my behalf and at my instruction to find a way through this that will protect the future of the Alloa campus. Because for me, the Alloa campus is essential because it is located in an area of deprivation in our country. We must maximise access to learning. That's what my political agenda is about ensuring that local communities that live in deprivation have access to learning facilities to enhance their prospects. And that's what the Government is working to resolve today.
Anna Sarwar.
So why is it under threat? A 20% real terms cut by this SNP government. So you can't dodge the record. The SNP often speak about tackling inequality but fail to deliver when it comes to educating our children. 60% of young Scots do not go to university, with working class kids more likely to go to college. But our colleges are in crisis, and that is directly on John Swinney, a failed former Education Secretary who, let's not forget, shamefully downgraded the results of working class kids during the pandemic. And now his SNP government refused to fund a new welding centre on the Clyde, forcing Labour to intervene and secure these skilled jobs. Livelihoods and futures derailed by SNP incompetence. Colleges cut, courses scrapped, futures denied. So why does this snooty, elitist SNP government refuse to recognise the value of Scotland's colleges?
First Minister, let's hear one another.
Where to start and all of that? My goodness. I don't think this state schoolboy getting lectured to about elitism is a great look for Mr Sarwar.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm very proud of my state school education as well. Very proud of it. Now, let's just take that apart one bit by one bit. Tackling inequality. Well, this is the only part of the United Kingdom where child poverty is going down because of the leadership of my government and my First Ministership. 93% of young people are going to positive destinations from our schools. And when it comes to big, lofty commitments, I stood beside Mr Sarwar, who told me there would be hundreds of millions of pounds to save Grangemouth, and Grangemouth got absolutely nothing, and it's closed. Mr Sarwar should go home and think again.
Always through the chair. Thank you. I call Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Greens and I want to, like colleagues across the chamber, send our thoughts, our prayers, our love and our solidarity to the victims of the attack at Heaton Park Synagogue and to the whole Jewish community today. This will cast a long shadow on Yom Kippur worship this evening. Scotland is a country of 5 million people, but fewer than 500 people and companies own half of this country's land, and many of them don't even live here. They're a motley crew, including aristocrats, billionaires, minor royals from across the world, and in some cases, we don't even know who they are. 750,000 acres are owned from tax havens like the Cayman Islands. More Scottish land is owned by corporations and the super-rich now than when the First Minister's party took office in 2007. And later this month, the Scottish Government will ask MSPs to vote for a new land reform bill, one that won't break up big estates or redistribute land from billionaires to the people of Scotland. So can I ask the First Minister, with less Scottish land in the hands of the people now than in 2007, is his government just scared of these billionaires?
First Minister.
Well, the government has, of course, taken a number of steps over a number of years to enable the purchase of land by communities to support developments which have enhanced community opportunity in a range of different parts of the country. And I've had the privilege in a number of different parts of Scotland to see at first hand the benefits, the productive benefits of community land ownership. Now, as Mr Greer knows, the Land Reform Bill will be before Parliament in the course of the next few weeks. Parliament will have the opportunity to scrutinise the proposals. We will, of course, be open to dialogue about any of those proposals to determine how we can ensure that the land asset of Scotland is used for the benefit of the people of Scotland, which is the underpinning of the government's policy agenda.
Ross Greer.
I'm grateful to the First Minister for that answer, and I planned on following up with another question about the specifics of the bill, but 4 Scots, including my constituent Sid Khan, were kidnapped by the Israeli military last night, and I feel I must raise that in Parliament today. They were part of the global Samud flotilla. Dozens of ships and hundreds of ordinary people doing what the world's governments have refused to do, trying to break Israel's siege of Gaza and deliver life-saving food and medical supplies to starving Palestinians. Their boats have been attacked by drones, had chemicals dropped on them, and last night they were attacked by the Israeli Navy. Not one boat made it to Gaza. Will the First Minister demand the immediate release of the 4 kidnapped Scots? Will he contact the Prime Minister and urge him to intervene? And given his government agreed to the Greens' proposal for Scotland to join the global boycott campaign against Israel, what new actions will he take to force an end to this genocide?
Thank you, First Minister. With regards to your responsibilities.
Presiding Officer, I am aware of the incident that Mr Greer raises with me and have seen material shared with me of comments from Sid Khan, who is one of the individuals who is involved in this situation. This morning I asked officials from the Scottish Government to seek an update from the United Kingdom Government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, which was forthcoming, and I am grateful for the information from the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office. They have informed us they have lobbied the Israeli Government to respect law and to protect everyone on board's safety, and we will keep in close contact with the United Kingdom Government regarding the well-being of those on the flotilla. In relation to the subsequent issues that Mr Greer raises with me about the actions of the Government, I set out in my statement to Parliament on the 3rd of September the actions the Government is taking, and I assure Mr Greer those have been followed up by the Government.
Thank you. Question number 4, Gordon MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister regarding the potential impact on marginalised communities and public services in Scotland, what the Scottish Government's response is to UK Government proposals to introduce a mandatory digital ID scheme.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I do not support the introduction of a mandatory digital ID scheme by the United Kingdom Government. People must be able to access public services through the channel that works for them. This might be a digital route, or it might be through face-to-face services or another method. We are engaging regularly with the UK Government to obtain further detail beyond the announced use for right-to-work checks and to further understand the implications of the proposed digital ID system on Scotland and our communities.
Gordon MacDonald.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. Forcing people to share their data just to go about their daily life is wrong. And the proposal by Keir Starmer serves as another distraction from the very real issues that the UK faces. Does the First Minister share my concern about the security of people's personal data and how the UK Government may seek to use it, as well as the barriers that will be put in the way of vulnerable people who already experience digital exclusion?
First Minister.
I think Mr MacDonald raises important issues about the question of digital exclusion, and many of these proposals, which could have an effect on some of the most vulnerable in our society, particularly people with disabilities, or in some circumstances older people, are issues that have to be entirely considered as part of this exercise. Obviously, the use of digital access to public services is appropriate in many circumstances where individuals are willing to participate in that, but we must act to avoid digital exclusion in all circumstances.
Thank you. Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I agree with the First Minister's stance on this. So I would say gently to him he would have more credibility on these issues had he not been such an evangelist for the SNP's hated named person policy, struck down by the courts for being an infringement of personal privacy. But what does the First Minister think is the worst aspect of this proposal? Is it the likely extortionate costs, the inevitable failure of the IT systems, the risk of a data breach, or the affront to civil liberty?
First Minister.
Well, obviously these are issues that have to be considered as part of the consideration of the ID cards proposition. I note that prior to the Prime Minister's announcement, opinion poll support, net support for digital ID cards stood at 35% in the early summer, and after the Prime Minister announced the proposal, it fell to minus 14% after the Prime Minister's announcement. So it does seem to be the case that whatever the Prime Minister touches, it turns to dust.
Graham Simpson.
Thank you. Under a Scottish Government document from 2021 titled Public Services Working for Us All, we were told the Government would introduce a digital identity service that would apparently be trusted and secure for users to, quotes, prove who they are and that they are eligible for a service. Now that the First Minister is apparently against such intrusion into our lives, can we assume these plans will not reappear?
First Minister.
Well, I think there's a fundamental point of difference here, which is about the opportunity for access to digital services, to public services through digital means if individuals wish to do so. That is fundamentally different from the mandatory proposition that is being advanced by the United Kingdom Government, as my colleague Gordon MacDonald indicates, as a distraction from the real difficulties the Government faces.
Thank you. Let's hear one another. Question number 5, Liz Smith.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's position is on whether NHS Tayside should exempt legal claims by former patients of Professor Sam El-Jamil from the 3-year time bar which is currently in place.
First Minister.
As Liz Smith will know, I am familiar with these issues from my engagement both as First Minister and as a constituency member with constituents affected by this issue. My thoughts are very much with the patients of Professor El-Jamil, which is precisely why we launched the public inquiry that is now underway, to ensure that they can obtain the answers to their questions and that lessons are learned. We fully expect NHS Tayside to consider all the facts and circumstances fairly on a case-by-case basis, including when considering whether to plead that a case is time-barred. The courts themselves already have the power to allow an action to proceed out of time by overriding the time bar if they see fit.
Liz Smith.
Can I thank the First Minister for that? And what the sentence that he's just quoted was exactly what the Health Secretary, Neil Gray, said in a letter to the patients. And can I just repeat that courts already have the power to enable an action to proceed overriding the time bar. Now, as the public inquiry is continuing to uncover a whole lot of information that was previously unknown to some of these patients, they are quite reasonably asking for that time bar to be lifted. So can I ask the First Minister for a categorical assurance that the Scottish Government has made this clear to NHS Tayside, as in that part of the 1973 Act, section 19A, allowing the ministers to ensure that NHS Tayside will lift the time bar, and that's clearly a major barrier to getting at the truth.
First Minister.
First of all, I acknowledge the long-standing engagement of Liz Smith on this issue, and I hope the words that I've put on the official record of Parliament give her some reassurance, because I said two things in my opening answer. The first is that we fully expect NHS Tayside to consider all of the facts and circumstances fairly on a case-by-case basis, including when considering whether to plead that a case is time-barred. So that point has been made clearly to NHS Tayside. And then it is a matter of fact, and this is my second point, which Liz Smith acknowledges, that the courts already have the power to allow an action to proceed out of time by overriding the time bar if they see fit. Now, that is for the courts to determine, so it's not for me as First Minister to make that clear. But the bit that I can make clear is what the Health Secretary has already done, which has been to make it plain to NHS Tayside that we expect the issue to be considered on a case-by-case basis. And we have not proceeded on a general basis. It has to be handled on a case-by-case basis. But we've made that clear to NHS Tayside, and the courts have the ability to apply that discretion should they judge that to be appropriate. And I think that's the right place for this issue to be handled. But I hope that provides the reassurance that Liz Smith is seeking. If there is further reassurance that she would like, she knows, of course, that the Health Secretary and I will engage with her and other members who I know are invested in this issue on this question.
Willie Rennie.
Can I thank the First Minister for his considered answer? And it is a detailed and considered answer, which I do think is helpful. But I'm standing here to make sure it is fully understood by all those in the positions of power and in the courts that there is a strength of feeling from Michael Mara, myself, Liz Smith and many others who have got constituents who've suffered for years. They've waited for years, and only now is the truth being fully established, beginning to be fully established, thanks to the public inquiry. So I just want to reinforce the point that if we can lift the time bar, that should be lifted so that compensation can be made available to those who have suffered for far too long.
First Minister.
President Officer, Mr Rennie gives me an opportunity to reinforce the point I was making to Liz Smith, which is that it's the expectation of government that NHS Tayside will consider actively on a case-by-case basis whether the time bar should be used as a plea or whether it should not. And that is influenced by the circumstances and the details that emerge. So the point that Mr Rennie makes about new information emerging as part of the public inquiry is absolutely material to that consideration. And I hope that that provides him with the assurance. I acknowledge his long-standing interest in this question. And for me, it's vital that members of the public who have suffered are able to get to the truth and are able to have no legal obstacles in being able to pursue that truth.
Question number 6, Jackie Baillie.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to reported comments from the Chair of the British Medical Association in Scotland that Scotland's NHS is dying before our eyes.
First Minister.
President Officer, as I have indicated to Parliament on a number of occasions, I acknowledge the pressures facing our National Health Service, but let me provide some context about the situation that we find ourselves in at this period. Waits are coming down within the National Health Service. Over 95% of patients diagnosed with cancer in Scotland are starting treatment within 31 days. And statistics this week show the median wait for treatment was 2 days, the joint lowest on record. 97% of discharges from Scottish hospitals happen without delay. The latest A&E figures show July 2025 had the lowest number of 8- and 12-hour waits for any month since September 2023. The number of operations performed in July was the highest in 5 years, 8.9% higher than July last year. GP numbers are up, and the number of nurses, midwives and staff working in our NHS are also up. So there are challenges, but the Government is investing to support the National Health Service.
Jackie Baillie.
The verdict from Dr Kennedy, who is a frontline clinician, is a damning indictment on this SNP government. He describes the system as broken. His words, not mine. But let's take cancer. The last time the SNP met its 62-day treatment target was 13 years ago. The number of cancer cases is now at a record high. The number of deaths have increased too. But it is the poorest communities who are being hit the hardest by the SNP's failures on cancer. Data from 2022 showed that cancer incidence was 24% higher for the most deprived Scots compared to the least deprived. But this week, the government refused to publish the latest data on cancer and deprivation. Why are they fiddling the figures yet again? What are they hiding? The First Minister cannot allow people to die early because they live in our poorest communities. What will he do to end this postcode lottery in cancer?
First Minister.
Well, I've just set out I acknowledge the challenges that exist around the 62-day cancer target, but the median wait for cancer treatment, so that's once somebody is identified as having a cancer diagnosis, on the 31-day pathway, the median wait was 2 days. 2 days, and the 95% standard has been met again by the National Health Service. Now, these are important steps, and also I could say to Jackie Baillie that the risk of dying from cancer in Scotland is now at a record low, an 11.1% reduction in mortality rates since 2013. So, whilst I acknowledge that there are still many pressures in the National Health Service, I hope those two statistics, the 2 days median wait for cancer treatment on the successfully met 31-day target, and also the risk of dying from cancer in Scotland is at a record low, will provide Jackie Baillie with some reassurance that the Government's focus on treating and supporting patients in all communities in Scotland, and I am absolutely determined to ensure that we tackle the issues of inequality. It's at the heart of the Government's strategy, and that will drive our policy approach as we take forward.
Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Ms Baillie didn't say that Dr Kennedy's assessment of our NHS also stated if it wasn't for international medical graduates and doctors coming from overseas that the NHS would have collapsed. We know that it's Westminster Labour's anti-immigration policies that are frustrating the efforts of overseas medical staff to come and support our health and social care services. So will the First Minister
hear one another?
Will the First Minister join me in calling for the Prime Minister to rethink these harmful anti-immigration policies?
First Minister.
President Officer, Claire Adamson raises a very significant issue about the flow of individuals to work in our National Health Service. Now, since in the year ending June 2025, there has been a 77% drop in the number of health and care visas been granted by the Home Office, a 77% drop. Yeah. We know from the data from Scottish Care that 26% of social care workers in our social care system have come from another country. Now, what that tells us is that we depend on a flow of individuals coming into Scotland to support our National Health Service, and that is being made more difficult, if not impossible, by the actions of the Labour Government. So, if Jackie Baillie is interested in solutions, she should try to persuade the United Kingdom Labour Government to take a different course that will help our National Health Service.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries, and I call Edward Mountain.
The Parliament will know the 4th of October is World Ostomy Day, and ostomates will know that although a bag may be needed for life, it gives them back their life. In 2003, First Minister, with the support of the previous First Minister, I launched 5 ARSs on behalf of Scottish ostomates. As today, only 1 has been delivered. Will the First Minister therefore acknowledge the importance of care and choice for ostomates and ask the Cabinet Secretary of Health to meet with me to see how we can progress the remaining asks before the dissolution of the Parliament?
First Minister.
First of all, Presiding Officer, can I pay tribute to Edward Mountain, who has given exemplary public personal leadership to this issue, and I thank him for the contribution to debate that he has made on this point. I'm very happy to ask the Health Secretary to meet with Mr Mountain. I'll ask for an update from that conversation to satisfy myself that everything that can be done to address the commitments that were given to Mr Mountain in the past are being done to assist in strengthening the care that's available for those who are affected.
Thank you. Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of reports this week that new information has emerged in the case of Moira Anderson, who disappeared in Coatbridge in 1957, aged just 11. It is reported that the new information is credible and suggests Moira's remains could be in an old mine shaft in the town. Will the First Minister join me, as well as Sandra Brown, OBE and founder of the Moira Anderson Foundation, in urging Police Scotland to continue to follow up on all leads, including this latest one? And I know that he will also share my hope that one day Moira will be located, bringing long overdue peace for her, her family and the whole Monklands community who have borne this tragedy down several generations for nearly 70 years.
First Minister.
I am aware of the reports that Mr McGregor raises with me, and I express at the outset of my answer my sympathies with the family of Moira Anderson and with to those who are involved in the Moira Anderson Foundation, a wonderful organisation, and especially to Sandra Brown, who gives such exemplary leadership to this activity. Sandra Brown and her colleagues have never lost the determination to solve the case of Moira Anderson's disappearance. Now, I obviously cannot comment on operational policing matters, but I am aware that Police Scotland have stated that any new information they receive relating to this case will be fully assessed and investigated, and it is an absolute priority for us to ensure that unresolved homicides are addressed. These cases are never closed, and as we have seen in recent years, the success of Police Scotland in investigating some of these and resolving some of these cases has brought peace to many individuals who have had to live with the torment of losing a loved one, and I hope dearly that that can be the case in relation to Moira Anderson.
Pauline McNeill.
Thank you. The First Minister has already addressed the question of what happened last night, the Global Samud flotilla, which was illegally intercepted by Israeli forces. There are 4 Scots, including my friend Sid Khan, that you've mentioned already, but Margaret Passetta, there's Jim Hickey and Yvonne Ridley. They were sailing in international waters and they were about to approach the 12-mile zone around Gaza, and I heard from them about 6 o'clock last night, which is now recognised as Palestinian territory by the UK Government. I'm aware that Hamish Faulkner, the Minister for the Middle East, has already contacted Israeli officials, and I think we're hopeful that we will get their safe return pretty soon. But does the First Minister agree that Israel is in breach of international law, that they had no right to be on board or siege any of these boats in the first place? And does the First Minister agree that there is a great deal of courage in the 500 people across the world who took part in this flotilla, and their aim, apart from taking the aid, was to show Palestinians in Gaza that the world has not forgotten them and how isolated that they feel?
First Minister, with regards to devolved responsibilities.
I associate myself entirely with the analysis of the situation that Pauline McNeill has set out. I welcome the commitments of Hamish Faulkner as the responsible minister in the United Kingdom Government. Indeed, I had the privilege of discussing these issues with Mr Faulkner, with Mr Sarwar at the Palestinian Embassy just in the last couple of weeks. There is, of course, a whole range of different issues here where all of us, well, many of us are concerned that Israel is operating outside the scope of international law. And for all of us, and Pauline McNeill and I will be absolutely at one on this, we have lived through a world where there has been a rules-based system and international law has been respected. And we are living in a world now today where that is feeling very frayed, and we have to return to a rules-based international system that will protect individuals, especially our citizens who have bravely decided to go to the aid of the Palestinian people. I commend them for their courage. I pray for their safety, and I assure Pauline McNeill that the Scottish Government will do all that we can to work with the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office, whose assistance I express my appreciation for in trying to ensure their safety in the days to come.
Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. New figures from Energy Action Scotland show energy debt has soared to a record £4.4 billion in just 4 years, with vulnerable Scots burdened with £400 million of that. It's a disgrace that in an energy-rich country so many are in fuel poverty, especially when, under a Labour UK government, they pledged to cut bills. The energy price cap has instead risen again to £1,755. Does the First Minister share my concern that Labour, the UK Government, has lost control of the cost of living crisis? And can he set out what the Scottish Government is doing to support households in the face of their inaction?
With a focus on devolved responsibilities, First Minister.
Officer, Karen Adam is absolutely correct that energy costs on average were supposed to have fallen by £300, but they are now nearly £200 higher than at the time of the UK general election last year. I share her concern about the energy costs on households in Scotland, and the Scottish Government continues through our budget this year to allocate over £3 billion a year to policies that tackle poverty and the cost of living, with over £300 million on energy efficiency and clean heating and over £196 million on winter benefits. And we will take forward further commitments in this respect in the budget that will come to Parliament in due course.
Webber.
Presiding Officer. First Minister, the visitor levy came into effect in Edinburgh yesterday, yet the final guidance for businesses was only published last week. The owner of Linwater Caravan Park has contacted me, stating that accommodation providers are reporting to me that booking systems have been unable to adapt in time, particularly to the 5-night rule, meaning that small operators now face the choice of applying the 5% levy incorrectly to all nights or inputting it manually for every booking. This is creating significant risks of error, bank refund fees and an extra administrative burden that small businesses can ill afford. First Minister, I believe it's unreasonable to expect these businesses to request the redesign of global booking systems and processes in just a few working days, especially when they've been seeking clarity from the Council since July. What support can the Scottish Government offer to those businesses during this transition period?
First Minister.
Parliament legislated for the visitor levy scheme and legislated for it on the basis that it would be designed and taken forward and administered at local level by individual local authorities. So the issues that Sue Webber raises with me are a matter for the City of Edinburgh Council under the Visitor Levy Scotland Act. And I think it's important that we respect the local autonomy of local authorities. I'm often encouraged by the Conservatives to respect local autonomy by our local authorities, and in this case I intend to do so.
Michael Mara.
Apologies, President Officer. This week, hundreds of staff left the University of Dundee, ending countless years of collective service. Their loss is keenly felt by their colleagues and their students and results from a crisis for which they bear no responsibility. And I know the First Minister will share my best wishes and thanks to them. I wonder whether the First Minister has had the chance to catch up on the astonishing scenes at yesterday's Education Committee. The trade unions and myself and other MSPs were told by ministers that the latest version of the University Recovery Plan for Management had been rejected, and rightly so. Yet yesterday the Scottish Funding Council said that it had neither been rejected nor approved, not alive and not dead. Can the First Minister provide proper clarity on the standing of this zombie plan so that the remaining staff watching on ever more anxiously can know what on earth is going on?
First Minister.
Well, what the Government is taking forward in dialogue with the Funding Council is an approach with the University of Dundee, which I've repeated to Parliament on numerous occasions before, will protect the character and the identity of the University of Dundee and its significance within the city, regional and national economies of Scotland. So the original proposals that came forward from the University of Dundee were unacceptable to the Government because that test would not have been met. That is the test the Government is applying. So there will obviously be developments of individual plans. I appreciate the importance and the necessity and the urgency of clarity about plans. That is what the Government is working on with the Funding Council. But I assure Mr Mara that what the Government is seeking in response to its willingness to invest to support the transition of the university is a university that will remain the strong asset to the city, the region and the country that the University of Dundee is, and that's the test that we're applying to those plans.
Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I warmly welcome the Scottish Government's work to respond to the immediate priorities of energy businesses in my constituency and across the North East, with £8.5 million of new funding for clean energy careers. And it's vital that we continue to support the communities that provided energy security through oil and gas for generations and ensure these communities remain at the centre of Scotland's energy future as the country accelerates towards a clean energy future. So can the First Minister say any more about the steps the Scottish Government is taking to support jobs and skills in the North East, particularly in the face of Labour's challenging fiscal regime?
First Minister.
So I welcome the investments that the Government has made in this area of policy. I had the pleasure on Monday of opening the Energy Transition Skills Hub in the city of Aberdeen, which results from £4.5 million of investment from our Just Transition Fund, and an excellent collaboration involving North East of Scotland College, the Energy Transition Zone and Shell UK, who have been significant partners in bringing about this development. So that is one example of the type of steps, and it was a pleasure to see Audrey Nicholl at the event on Monday in Aberdeen. In relation to the Energy Profits Levy, I have made it crystal clear to Parliament I think the Energy Profits Levy has gone on for far too long and is set at too high a level. And that's an issue that the United Kingdom Government has got to address, and I hope it does so.
Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the 2025 Scottish Stroke Improvement Report shows that in my region of Mid-Scotland and Fife, only 67% of stroke patients in NHS Fife, 53% in NHS Tayside and 40% in NHS Forth Valley received a full stroke care bundle on admission, which is seriously failing from the 80% required standard. Across Scotland, not a single health board met the standard, with just 53% of patients receiving the bundle across the country. The Scottish Government now wants to introduce a revised 100% standard, which I welcome. But given that we're not close now, how will the Government ensure that health board management teams and, more importantly, the named person for stroke are accountable to meet the standard? And what immediate action will be taken to support our hard-working stroke clinical teams so that they can give patients the effective care that they urgently deserve?
First Minister.
President Officer, I think the fundamental point in the heart of Ros McCall's question is the importance of ensuring that patients that suffer a stroke are able to be provided with the rehabilitation and support to enable their recovery. And of course, where that is provided, in many cases, recovery is very strong as a consequence. So the importance and the urgency of this question is not lost on me. Obviously, the steps that the Government is taking in ensuring that we have a better flow-through of patients within our healthcare system is designed to make sure that patients can receive the support they require in hospital and then ideally at home. Measures such as Hospital at Home are designed to assist in that respect as well, to enable the rehabilitation of individuals who have suffered health incidents such as a stroke. And I will look closely at the application of the standards to ensure that the improvements that Ros McCall seeks are able to be taken forward.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. I call Keith Brown for a point of order.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm sure you agree, Presiding Officer, it's very important that in this chamber we speak the truth. Important for the benefit of the people in the gallery, for every member of this chamber, for the reputation of the Parliament and for the wider public, not least to try and stem the tide of misinformation and disinformation that we see all the time. Today, Russell Finlay, who, even from those that tried to speak against or shout down the truth, Russell Finlay today, who during this session has already had to apologise to the Chamber for falsely accusing me of misleading Parliament, has himself today sought to mislead Parliament by stating that a majority of people in Scotland pay more tax than their counterparts in the rest of the UK, when in fact the truth is a majority of people in Scotland pay less tax than in the rest of the UK. Presiding Officer, we are all entitled to our own opinions, but we are not entitled to our own facts. In order to help build trust in this place, can Mr Finlay be offered the opportunity, when he eventually returns to the Parliament, to correct the record and apologise for misleading Parliament?
Thank you, Mr Brown. The content of members' contributions is not ordinarily a matter for the Chair. It is generally a debating point. And that concludes First Minister's questions. And the next item of business is a members' business debate in the name of Ariane Burgess, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the public gallery and the chamber to do so.